Alpha is a unique series developed wholly by Lister Petter to meet the demand for compact, lightweight, air and water-cooled diesel engines with low noise and vibration. Alpha is an entirely new concept. To minimize downtime and servicing costs, it utilizes separate preset fuel pumps for each cylinder and self-adjusting hydraulic tappets, all of which are totally maintenance-free. The Alpha series includes 8 models featuring both direct and indirect injection. The one demonstrated here is the 3-cylinder water-cooled indirect injection engine. Specific detail on the other models is in the Alpha series workshop manual. It's essential that a copy is available when working on the engine. But when you refer to it, you must have the correct build number for the engine you're working on. The engine number gives all the information you need to know. Add 50, and this is the year of manufacture. The serial number, unique to each engine. Engine type. A is air-cooled, W is water-cooled, and WS indicates an indirect injection water-cooled version. Next, the number of cylinders. Then, the rotation. A is anti-clockwise, C is clockwise. Lastly, and most importantly, the build number. This defines the settings for each engine in the workshop manual. The Alpha series has been designed to be easy to set up, work on and maintain. And to take full advantage of this, we do recommend that you use a methodical approach, laying all the parts out in sequence. A pack of special tools has been produced by Lister Petter to simplify work on the Alpha series even more. And you'll find that you need only a small number of standard tools to do any job. And when you're ordering replacements, specify Lister Petter genuine parts. They've been made to our exact specifications to maximize engine life and to minimize costs. The first ancillary to be removed from a water-cooled engine is the radiator. First, take off the hoses. Then take out the lower securing bolts and the securing bolts on the stay. Loosen the stay with 2 bolts on the water pump backplate. Then lift the stabilizing bar and remove the radiator. The fan blade assembly is secured by a left-hand thread nut. Slacken this off and remove. At this stage, also unbolt the radiator support bracket and remove the radiator stay. To remove the alternator, first slacken the bolts to untension the fan drive belt. Then unbolt the alternator and spacer. The last ancillary to come off is the starter motor. The first job in removing the cylinder head is to take off both the inlet and exhaust manifolds. On the inlet manifold, there are 2 bolts per cylinder. On the exhaust, 2 studs per cylinder. Make sure that all traces of the old gaskets are completely cleaned off. Slacken and remove the injector pipes. You can now extract the injectors using the special Lister-Petter socket provided for indirect injection engines. The individual cylinder head covers are attached with 2 nuts and a rubber sealing ring. Once they're off, remove the valve rockers and take out the push rods. It's important here to keep each set of nuts, rockers and rods together so that the same wearing parts mate together again when the engine is rebuilt. To disconnect the water pump, remove the 5 bolts from the pump assembly, then lift off, making sure there's no debris or seal remnants left. When you're disconnecting the lifting eye, make a note of its location. It differs in each model. Now the cylinder head can be taken off. Loosen the bolts in this order. Use a long socket to prevent any possible damage to the exhaust manifold studs. Because these bolts are torqued to yield point, they should be discarded and replaced for the rebuild. This is the indirect injection water-cooled head and cylinder. The direct injection water-cooled engines and the air-cooled models have different heads and pistons. Examine the head gasket. At the flywheel end, there's a tab with a 1, 2 or 3-hole identification code for reordering. The final step in this section is to lift out the pushrod tubes and gently remove the rubber seals and washers from the crankcase. Before the pistons are extracted, a number of components have first to be removed. First, the fuel pipes and rail. Next, unbolt the fuel lift pump. And the fuel filter. Unscrew the oil filter and take out the dipstick. Disconnect the oil pressure switch and adapter if fitted, and if there's a solenoid, take that off too. But make a note of the positions of the special fixing bolts. Next, to get access to the sump, the crankcase door has to be removed. Release the bolts in this particular sequence. Now you can get inside to unscrew the oil pressure relief valve. Then do the same with the oil strainer. Before the piston is actually extracted, remove any carbon that may have built up around the top of the bore. Rotate the piston to bottom dead center and take off the end cap. Then rotate the piston to top dead center and screw the special piston lifting tool into the conrod end. By levering the tool up, the piston is forced up and can be lifted out. Mark the conrod with the cylinder number so it goes back in the right location. To prevent rotation, screw in the special flywheel locking tool between gear teeth. Now remove the front pulley with its left-hand threaded bolt. Move the engine control to the stop position, remove the fuel pump clamps, and then lift out each fuel pump and remove its shim pack. It is very important to identify shim packs with the cylinders they came from. The gear end cover can now be removed. Take out the flywheel locking tool and insert the special oil seal protection sleeve into the end cover. Unscrew the retaining nuts in this order. Don't use a screwdriver to lever off. This will damage the mating surfaces. Clean off all traces of the old joint. The next step is to dismantle the governor. Release the speeder spring from the governor linkage. Then remove the spring retainer. Release the bottom pin and the top pin. Now you can take out the governor assembly, but make sure that you retain the shim washers between the pivot and the governor assembly. Take off the governor sleeve. Then remove the plates that secure the governor weights. Next, the tappets and fuel pump cam followers. Extract them with a magnet, and then identify the tappets and cam followers with each cylinder. Finally, the camshaft. Turn the engine until the governor weight slots in the camshaft are vertical. Remove the two camshaft thrust plate screws and the control lever tension spring. Then carefully ease out the camshaft. Using the special adapter, the camshaft bearing is now extracted. First, take out the oil pump secured by two bolts. Replace the flywheel locking tool. Using a puller, remove the crankshaft pinion. Unbolt the flywheel. Unscrew the flywheel locking tool and lift off the flywheel itself. Unbolt the housing. Insert the special oil seal protection sleeve and remove the flywheel end main bearing housing. Now the crankshaft can be released. Take a manifold bolt and screw it into the center main bearing locating dowel. Reaching in through the crankcase, mark the center main bearing housing itself with the location of the dowel. Then withdraw the dowel, leaving the manifold bolt on for reinstallation. With the crankshaft no longer secured in place, it can be gently withdrawn and the center main bearing housing taken off. Finally, all the main and crankshaft bearing shells are removed using special tools. The strip down is complete. All parts should now be examined for wear, particularly the crankshaft, cylinder bores, camshaft lobes, valves and guides. Only Lister-Petter genuine parts should be used as replacements. Begin the rebuild by replacing the main bearing shells in the gear end of the crankcase and in the flywheel end main bearing housing. The gear end thrust washers are replaced with the soft face towards the crankshaft. The centre main bearing housings, complete with bearings, are now fitted to the crankshaft. The crankshaft can now be replaced. When it's in place, line up the centre bearing dowel hole using the mark made on the strip down. Refit the dowel and remove the bolt. Fit a new oil seal to the flywheel end main bearing housing and then insert the special oil seal protection sleeve. At this stage, coat both sides of the new main bearing housing shim with sealer. Then fit to the housing with the flat side towards the crankcase. The housing is now bolted back onto the crankcase, with the locating tang of the thrust washer pointing upwards. Now that the crankshaft is in position, check end float with a dial test indicator. The flywheel housing goes on next, followed by the flywheel itself. Take care to line up the locating dowel. Use the locking tool for final tightening. Heat the crankshaft pinion until it's straw yellow, approximately 210 degrees centigrade. Then carefully fit with the timing mark outwards. The oil pump can now be bolted back into position. Make sure that both outlets are pointing downwards. When you're replacing the camshaft, first fit a replacement camshaft bearing into the crankcase. Then line up the timing marks on the crankshaft and camshaft gears and check that the thrust plate is in the right position for the control spring. Put back the hydraulic tappets. With the fuel pump tappets, the long slot must point outwards. Now replace the governor weights and the sleeve, complete with steel thrust plate. The governor pump rack linkage locates into the far end of the crankcase. Refit the pivot pins and shims. Locate the bottom pin with the spring link. Finally, replace the speeder spring. To refit the fuel pumps, first clamp the pump rack with the special rack setting tool. Then replace the fuel pump shims to the cylinder they were removed from. Rotate the engine until number 1 fuel pump tappet is in its lowest position. Insert the fuel pump, making sure that it's located with the peg in the rack. Turn the pump anti-clockwise until you can feel the resistance of the rack. Now fit the clamp and tighten down, without letting the pump move. Repeat for all the other pumps, and when the operation is complete, remove the setting tool. Should the fuel pump shims be misplaced, a piston displacement method can be used to find the correct number of shims for each pump. This is how it works. From the workshop manual, find the timing of the engine and the piston displacement dimension. Fit the piston assembly complete. Using a dial test indicator, rotate the engine clockwise until it brings the piston to top dead center. Then rotate the engine anti-clockwise until the correct displacement figure is reached. Once this is set, use a depth gauge to measure from the crankcase face to the top of the fuel pump tappet. Make a note of the reading. Subtract this from the dimension B given in the workshop manual, and the difference is the amount of shims you need. Repeat for any cylinder necessary, and when completed, remove the setting tool. The gear end cover can now be replaced. Fit a new joint over the two dowels and insert the special oil seal protection sleeve first. The bolts are tightened to the torque figure in the workshop manual, in this sequence. Use the flywheel locking tool to prevent rotation. Then replace the front crankshaft pulley. Note that the pulley has a left-hand thread. Now to adjust the engine control. Move the engine stop lever to the stop position. Turn the adjusting screw clockwise until it's clear of the stop lever. Then turn it anti-clockwise until it just touches the face of the stop lever. Tighten the lock nut. Find the fuel pump G setting from the workshop manual. Place the special gauge at the correct G setting between the top of the stop lever and the top adjusting screw. Use the lower adjusting screw to set the correct measurement.